Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Faithfully Invested, a podcast brought to you by the MCCA Income Fund. Today we had an amazing guest, our sister Julide Turker, on the podcast. She is an author of 2 books, a naturopath and a mother of 3. This one's an amazing episode. You're really going to love it. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe on the video, and all of the details of Julide and how you can follow her are in the description below. Assalamu alaikum.
In this day and age, in the 21st century, with the amount of chemicals we're exposed to, food and deliberately our food pyramid is challenged. But it's a predicament because everything's hybridized, the soil's occupied with, all these pesticides. I put up a post on Instagram which went absolutely crazy, but I got some really crazy comments. And I like to reflect on it. I don't get offended. I don't delete the comments unless they're disrespectful toward Islam. If it's disrespectful toward me, I don't really mind, to be quite honest with you. I don't take it personal, right? And people really struggled. The post was on puberty in Islam and the science of puberty from an Islamic paradigm. And I had Muslims that are messaging saying, well, Jules, I really don't understand the connection between puberty and Islam. Like, what has reaching puberty got to do with Islam? And I'm like, well, isn't Islam like a philosophy? It's a lifestyle. It's about everything.
Yeah.
Look at all the hadith that Aisha radiallahu anha narrated, which is all about marriage and the consent and the allowed and disallowed. Yeah, like if Islam wasn't involved in puberty, then how are we going to know a certain Islamic jurisprudence around how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to clean ourselves and so on and so forth? Like really basic stuff. I feel like we've lost connection with even common sense now.
Yeah. I think even also like the age where we're actually like judged based on our actions and what we do happens after puberty.
Exactly. I love that. And that's so wise. So when people sometimes again on socials can find when I share things about raising children, it's so permissive parenting. But the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam would stand up when Fatima radiallahu anha, this is a sahih narration, would come into the room, right?
True, yeah.
And then you see that there's another sahih narration about the man who says, I've never hugged my son. And he says, what can I do if Allah withdrew the mercy from your heart? And like all these hadith, like I'm no hadith scholar. I've not studied Islamic sciences, but I have common sense, and Islam is for the layman too. It's not just supposed to be translated by, our scholars and so on and so forth. And just what you said, punishment, authoritarian parenting has created a culture now of us, our generation, and we are so disassociated because we don't know how to deal with our emotions because we've not been taught. Because a man can't cry, a man has to be a man. You can't feel. What do you do with all those emotions?
You're dropping like bombs right now, like fire.
No, this is still on.
So, like,
you want to do an introduction?
No. I want this to be in the podcast.
It is. This is the podcast.
Are we on
rolling, bro. Yeah.
We're on it?
Yeah, you can see. Look at the sign, brother.
You didn't do the intro.
No, we don't need to do the intro.
It's because there was no formal introduction.
We can do the intro halfway down. So
this is amazing.
This catches on.
So so we're pretty much told to control our emotions. Sorry, go on. And
well, no, you're told to suppress them, or what do? Either suppress them, ignore them, or act like gaslight yourself to think it's unimportant. And then when that emotion comes up when you're an adult, what do? And I'm sorry to say this on a live podcast, but addiction is massively problematic. Gulf countries have the highest level of pornography addiction. No one knows about that. Is that that's the elephant in the room? Yeah, we're addicted to food. Gulf countries have the highest number of type 2 diabetes. And that's a diet-related health challenge, right? Why? If in our backyard we have all the information around what do we eat, even how much to eat, a third of your stomach, and what to eat, halal and tayyib, these concepts are not foreign to us. They're in our backyard. But we go to, carnivore cringe and they take, fasting out of our background, out of our backyard 2 times a week. And then the bloke says, do Monday and Thursday. And they ask him why. And he's like, because historically one of the main religions suggested, right? And that's the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then we don't know about it. And then Muslims come to me and they go, I want to do a fast diet. And I'm like, fast according to the Sunnah. Like, well, how should I do it? Wake up before dawn, eat your meal, make sure it's light, make sure you're hydrated well, make sure it's at least half an hour before prayer so you got enough time to digest. And then when the sun sets, break your fast. Yani, why would I deter from that prescription? That is perfect. That's from Allah. Who am I to make a suggestion that is going to be more wise or better or whatever? And I always say, like, even to clients in clinic, if they're Muslim and if they're actively Muslim too, some people are Muslim on their birth certificate, right? Then I say, you know what, can we start to implement some fasting? Best way to initiate cellular cleansing is to fast. The body was created for periods of hunger, and we don't know that. You know, there's a beautiful explanation where one of the Sahaba speaks to one of the scholars, and I can't remember their name, so forgive me. And he says, what do you call a man who eats once a day? And the I'm going to say that Rasul replies, I assume it's a hadith. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. He says, once a day is for the Nabi, it's for the prophets. And then he asks, what about if we eat twice a day? And he says, that's for the Muslim. That's for the average believer. And he goes, what about if you eat 3 times a day? And he says, for him, build a trough. And a lot of people can take that very literally to say, astaghfirullah, am I a pig if I eat 3 times a day? Not necessarily. But the idea, metaphorically, the concept is not to overeat, to spread out your meals, not so much so focused on, am I a pig if I eat 3 times a day? Most of us eat 3 times a day, especially in summer. The days are longer. And your size can be a lot smaller, but you don't take that transliteration very literally. There's a lot more to that than just a literal understanding, you know? So it's an interesting time to be alive, alhamdulillah.
You know what I really love about this is the fact that she brought up that we require people like, for example, I don't even want to use his name, but Jordan Peterson or something of the likes to come in and say, you know what, fasting actually does the trick. And it's like, hang on a second, 1400 years ago, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has been telling us. Like,
so you're backward-minded if you do it according to the Sunnah, but you're forward-minded if you do it according to the Western principles, which were taken from our very backyard.
Subhanallah.
It was taken from our backyard, you know? And still as Muslims, it's not good enough. We're trying to find like, how can I do it better? Should I do a water fast? Did the Rasul do a water fast? No, he just did fasting during Ramadan. Why would I need to innovate anything in addition? And it's not to say don't do it if it benefits you, but get the template right first. Like, just do the easy stuff first. Get the foundations of the house. Let's lay the cement, the concrete first. And then we can start to build the walls and add the doors and all the rest of that, yeah? We're trying to like add the doors and the windows before we've even laid the foundations of the home, I suppose. And that's why it's so challenging, you know? And this is interesting because Australia is the largest meat exporter. The vast majority of the Gulf meats come from Australia. Are they really halal meat? Barely any of it's hand-slaughtered. Barely any of it's hand-slaughtered. And I know a lot of people then come into the picture and say, this is permissible, this is not. But if someone is saying something is permissible and the Quran literally outlines the permissibility as being A, B, and C, and you're forfeiting that as a scholar and saying it is because of this, I don't know if that's really the right thing to do either, right? It really makes me wonder if that's the advice we should be taking.
I love this. Julide's getting us in some serious trouble right now.
Yeah, I know,
100%.
always.
Listen, Anik,
No, you know what?
Go
Go for it. No, go for it. I actually recently was asked to attend a meeting at the Arab Chamber of Commerce that were involved. They were involved in a certain petition to try and unify the halal certification bodies in Australia because we know we have heaps. And subhanAllah, the things I heard from the various organizations, I was like, everyone's like sort of doing their own thing, right? So these people would certify this way. Other people will certify that the other way. And it's like, it's all halal. It's all got the certificate. But then at the end of the day, like us as consumers, we're like, what is really halal? What isn't? Like, because we don't know. We're not in the abattoirs.
Well,
Like,
look, traditional example of this I gave in my book, The Sunnatarian, which hasn't been published yet in December, inshallah. Like you look at a particular brand of marshmallows, it's got the halal certification because the gelatin comes from halal certified bovine.
Okay, yeah.
Halal certified cows. But it contains cochineal or artificial red. Now it contains cochineal because artificial red has been ruled out because of massive connections in the literature with neurological injury, neurological disease. It's kind of like the parent allows the child to be on a chicken nugget diet, eating coloured lollies every day. And when the child is misbehaving, the label is he's naughty, he's bad, I've got to punish him, I've got to be authoritarian, you're too permissive. But you don't understand how you have affected their biology and their biochemistry with what you fed the child. We need to remember that our physical body, right, houses our spirit. And so that means we're 50% responsible for the physical body and 50% for the spiritual. So you can't feed your spirit if you void the physical aspect.
Wow.
And then we have people who feed the spiritual aspect, physical, my apologies. So like, you know, all these influencers that have millions of followers and, you know, they eat well and they're ripped, six-pack, whatever. But their spiritual wellness is void and they commit suicide. Because you can be physically very fit, but mental health requires a connection with the one who created you. And so for us, I'm really inspired on my learning journey. By the way, everyone thinks I'm not fallible too. I'm so fallible. I make mistakes every day. I say stuff and I'm like, man, that was so immature. Could have done it better. But like, you know, I have to also give myself some grace too, because I'm only a human being. I'm allowed to make mistakes and I'm allowed to kind of go, I shouldn't have done that. I should have said it a little bit better. And I don't always do things the right way. And so I think also in this cancel culture, we think that when we look up to someone to give us advice, they have to be like perfection. And if they make a mistake, unfollow. And it's such a sick culture to be in, because I can tell you without an ounce of doubt in my heart, 100% of the people I follow, there is an aspect of what they say I disagree with. Mm-hmm. I still love them and I hold on to their advice because there is much I agree with. I mean, who gets along with their husbands and wives and their mums and dads in every aspect of their... I was talking to you about this, Adam, yesterday, this cancel culture, this kind of like, if you disagree with me, even though we're united with Islam as our core connecting value or even just our humanity, if you don't agree with me that I don't want to feed my child a cochineal bar and you think I'm an extreme parent and you unfollow my social media or whatever, like that's so immature. Like how hard is it to kind of go, I don't agree with that part of what she said, but I agree with this part, so I'm going to hold on. Because everyone that I follow, there's massive aspects that I don't agree with them. And there are parts that I do agree with. I mean, it's like saying every time you disagree with your husband or your wife, you get a divorce, you break up. Or, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm sure you and Adam would say that I agree with. And there are certain things that I'm going to disagree with. And I'm happy with that. That's how you make a human connection, to be able to talk about, you know, these things. Yeah. It's okay to not always agree on everything, you know. Respectfully. I always say on my platform too, every opinion is welcome, but within the paradigm of respect. Say it kindly. You say, I don't agree with you. I think that's actually untrue. That's fine. You're entitled to your own opinion. I'm happy with that. You're welcome here. As long as it doesn't insult religion and as long as it's not, you know, purposely perpetrating, you know, a desire to kind of bring someone else down, which is not very lovely at all.
Definitely, yeah. Take the good, leave the bad. That's it.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
There's no other way to do it in this day and age because everyone has flaws. We're not created as angels, are we?
No. I feel like these days people want to like enforce their opinion on you. And if you have a contrary opinion, then you're a bad guy. They're labeled as a bad person.
Yeah,
you know, often we hear you talk about mind, body, and spirit. And that's like what you focus on a lot, right? And you sort of touched on that very quickly with that red thing that, what is it? That I can't even say the word.
Red color?
Cochineal.
Cochineal. Cochineal, right?
Yeah.
Can you just go into depth about that? Because you said that it affects
the
specifically
central
kids
nervous
that have
system.
neurological.
So what affects them is allure, which is the artificial red dye.
Artificial red dye.
So the artificial red dye has been banned in Europe by the European Union for, I'm going to say over a decade, maybe even more. Australia catches up very slowly with everything when it comes to health, unfortunately. But then, so when they eliminated this red dye, because I had no choice because the public picked up on it, there was so many well-established studies that you could not argue against, making the connection that neurological challenges are being born out of our children consuming these artificial dyes, specifically red for this conversation. And then they've phased it out slowly in Australia because it's illegal now. And so now even like chewing gum, you know, your regular chewing gum you buy from the petrol station, now they've got the cochineal in there, which is the insect. And again, it's not the concept of halal and tayyib. Is it halal? Let's just say it is for the sake of this discussion, but is it tayyib? And if it's not tayyib, is halal good enough or are you only going 50% of the way? Because I think you're only going 50% of the way, right? And how is that, I suppose, affecting our spiritual self? You know, in the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually, Umar radiallahu anha has a beautiful saying to caution us against meat. And it's in the Muwatta, by the way, by Imam Malik. And he says, beware of meat, for in meat there is an addiction like there is in wine. And when we look at the literature, there's something phenomenal. Casein opioids. So in dairy, and dairy comes from cattle, casein opioids trigger the parts of the brain in our central nervous system that create an addiction. So 1400 years ago, Umar radiallahu anha warned us that if we eat too much of it, we may become addicted. And now if you don't eat meat, you're almost like people are going to like kick you out of Islam, you know, because meat has become such a predominant part of our culture. And if you look at it, even about 100 years ago, meat was, even in more, I suppose, Gulf countries, it was like sprinkled onto the rice. Yeah, like you didn't have like 250 grams of Wagyu, which, do you know how they do Wagyu? I get called onto a lot of podcasts. I don't know why I don't stop getting called on.
You're going to destroy Wagyu, huh?
I'm going to, well, you know what?
You're speaking to someone who's had a Wagyu steak last night.
Yeah, like, I went to volcanoes.
I had an eye fillet. I had a very lean eye fillet.
Yeah, they're never gonna sponsor me. But that's look, I always say the information is out there. I'm not a fascist. I don't push my opinions on anyone. For me, being in this industry, it was very easy to become vegetarian. It was very easy to be conscious in my food. I make other errors as a Muslim. There are other areas in my lifestyle that I'm very challenged in that is perhaps needing improvement. So I don't judge that you had Wagyu last night. That's an area that I can very easily avoid, and it's an area that you may not, but I might be doing something behind the scenes that you avoid as a sin, right? So all joke aside, it's not for me to judge, but the information is out there, like something like Wagyu. Okay, so what animal does it come from?
Cow.
Yeah, cows. And traditionally in Japan, I think it was where it came from. How do you think the meat becomes so marbled?
I'm guessing some sort of injections.
No.
They contain them in an area.
They contain them in a very small area. Okay, they're not allowed to go outside and roam. There's no free range. Wagyu is not free range. So they're in small rooms and they need to get fat because they need to increase the fat store. That's why the meat is marble. The marbled section is the fat, right? And that's because, subhanAllah, the animal is not allowed to move. And instead of movement, they massage the animal. Because in every country, including horses, they're not classified as pets. They're classified as livestock. And you can do whatever the hell you want to livestock because there is no animal rights under livestock, I suppose, legislation, so to speak. And, so they're contained in a very small place and they are not allowed to go out and they are extensively massaged because they need some movement or they're going to die quickly. And they're very fat. And they're very fat because so they barely can move anyway. And then you eat them.
The interesting thing is they're not just massaged. So in some places in Japan, to help the muscles relax even more, they actually massage Japanese alcohol into the cow.
Yeah.
I watched the whole documentary about it. And it's interesting you mentioned the hadith by the narration from Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu.
Yeah.
And he talks about the addiction of meat. In the Muwatta of Imam Malik, he also talks about, he was asked a question in regards to a rich woman who ate meat.
Twice a week.
Said twice a week.
Yeah.
So Islam, our diet is supposed to be semi-vegetarian.
They've already told us. I'm not telling you. When people go to me, how much meat should I eat? Once a week is ample.
Yeah.
But can you imagine if your wife cooked you meat once a week? You'd be like, what is this?
Don't worry, she's Egyptian. All I get is kushri.
Yeah.
So kushri is like vegetarian.
And the reality is it's hard too to change our lifestyle. Yeah. Like we start somewhere. That's why it was really famous to do like Meatless Mondays because eating meat became very easy. Even for me as a mum, it's really easy. If I want to cook meat, it's the easiest dish I can come up with. But if I want to cook vegetarian, I'm blessed because I come from a Turkish background and we have something called zeytinyağlılar, don't we? And so that's olive oil based okras and beans and stews that are olive oil based. Okay. Very delicious. Well, I think anyway, if I say so myself, I must be right. And so it's a little bit easy for me, but I understand people. They're like, oh my God, if I'm not going to have like a chicken in the oven, what am I going to have what's my husband going to eat? I usually hear that and I'm like, I ain't consulting you for your husband. Go figure that out yourself.
Yeah.
Can I ask specifically, okay, so we know the deen aspect of things and it's always been pushed that we are a little bit more cognizant of how much we take in and in regards to meat and like how we should be pushing towards having less of it. But like scientifically, let's speak about that. What is the benefits or what is the reason we need to be aware of having less meat in our diet?
So I'll give you the most controversial answer here. Around soy, for example, right? Everyone always barks up the soy tree. Soy is so bad for you. It makes a man turn into a woman. The most absurd thing I've ever heard as a scientist who understands the biochemistry of food. So I studied my master's at Melbourne University in food sciences, food engineering. And the things that I was exposed to was wow. But I'm going to come back to that shortly about artificial insemination of cattle. Someone has to remind me. So I actually talk about that. Adam's like, let me make a note of that because I can't remember too. And so from a health perspective, the way that it's been marketed is when you consume, like you call it a protein. Like when I say, what did you eat? People go to me, oh, I had protein and a salad. So people don't understand that seeds contain amino acids too. Protein is just a sequence of amino acids. And they're the sequence of amino acids that we require to replace our tissues, right? And so if you have a look at it, depending on the animal, like there is, and I've done so much research on them because I've written the books on it, there is so much research that why, for example, from an Islamic perspective, I have to sort my thoughts because so much is coming into my mind right now. I've got to calm down.
We go all day.
First and foremost, in Islam, for example, we let number one, we have to tie their eyes. We have to calm them down, pet them because they know they're going to fulfill their obligation on this earth plane. And we recite dua and then we cut them from their jugular vein. People think that is barbaric. So if vegans are watching this, they're going to be like, Jules, you suck. But we do that because we want them to not suffer and we want the blood let out because the blood will contain a lot of elements in there that's very unhealthy. When we give permission for chicken, for example, to be zapped, they die mostly or they're paralyzed before they're slaughtered. And that's a big predicament because they've accumulated, and this is why we tie their eyes. You don't want to build adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. All these hormones are building up in their blood because of their fear. And then you eat that and you literally behave like a headless chook. Like literally it affects your nervous system because you've taken in excessive amounts of cortisol and adrenaline from the slaughtered animal that you've consumed. Another example of this is sex hormones. We have a plethora of conditions in Australia for men and women where we're getting reproductive disorders. Now, one part of that pizza, there are many slices. I'm not primarily blaming it to a meat-based diet, but one of the reasons why we have hormonal imbalances is because we consume a lot of meat and dairy. Now, are animals male and female?
Yeah.
So what makes a male and female? The sex hormones, right? Testosterone, estrogen, etc. So if I have a female reproductive condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is where, or endometriosis, which is where there's too much estrogen in my body, and then I consume meat and I'm eating the estrogen also is coming into my body from the beef pie that I had or from the barbecue I had, whatever. So my body is already not able to deal with my own sex hormones. And sex hormones are hormones that control our reproduction. It's not relative to the libido per se, primarily. It's our reproduction, the way that we have children, so on and so forth, right? So yes, in a nutshell, whether it's the stress hormones we're getting from cattle, whether it's the sex hormones we're getting from cattle, no one knows about the vaccination schedule of cattle. No one knows how much antibiotics they're pumped. They use preventative antifungals, preventative antibiotics. Our fat tissue, you know, in the Wagyu you had last night that I'm not judging you about. So our fat tissue can store, so our adipose tissue, which is why weight loss is so important. When we lose weight, we're losing a lot of toxins from the body, not just fat, right? So our fat tissue, and the same goes to animals, their fat tissue stores toxins. So if we don't have the capacity to detoxify, we will use our fat stores and our harder organs to store the toxins so that we don't immediately get a disease. That's a hikmah. That's the wisdom, the hikmah of the way that the body works. In clinic, for example, especially in children with neurological injury, I tend to use a particular functional lab testing. It's called hair mineral analysis. And what we do is the hair generally stores minerals. It's made up of minerals, and it stores heavy metals. So it gives us insight on exposure to heavy metals, and especially if your body has gene mutations that disallow detoxification, which is one of the reasons sometimes children can be affected by their medications because they have gene pathways that don't allow them to detoxify. So when they're exposed to toxins at a very high level, it just gets congested in the body and then neurological injury can prevail, which is also the reason why not everyone who is exposed to Tylenol, for example, experiences a neurological injury, but we can see there's growing evidence to suggest taking antipyretic medication during pregnancy. Now there's a meta-analysis that connects it to ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And Tylenol says, well, we've always said don't take it when you're pregnant. But whenever you have pain, what do? The first thing you go to is pain relief. Why? Pain is really a messenger. It's an opportunity for us to kind of go, this feels uncomfortable. But we are so disassociated with our bodies and we are so unsure of what to do with discomfort. We never want to feel it. And, Rumi says, the wound is where the light enters. That's why light never enters, because we never have the capacity, mostly, to hold space for the pain that's going to come up if we ever did, which is why we're addicted to those square things and we're 24/7 on the phone.
Well,
because we want to distract our minds from otherwise what's going to come up if we didn't distract ourselves.
Sure. Yeah, man, dropping bombs. I feel like we've hit so many important points, and like I'm learning as you're speaking. And often when you speak, I learn because I'm not really familiar with this whole space, right? Like, and I pick
learn
this
when
up.
you speak too, Adam. Thank you.
Thanks, Julide. Well, that makes me feel a lot better.
me too.
A lot less, uneducated. I didn't go to Melbourne University. I went to VU because that's where every drop kick went. But it's not.
Well,
I wanted
didn't
to.
go there, bro.
You didn't go. So although we're dropping these bombs here, I feel like, and everyone knows who Julide is, mashallah, but we still need to do a bit of an introduction. So I want to ask something.
She's polite.
She's polite.
It's just polite.
I want to ask, Julide, if someone wants to ask you, who are you, right? Professionally, personally, can you give us just a quick introduction as to who you are? And that way, I guess our viewers who aren't familiar with you, which I highly doubt, can get to know who Julide is.
There's a lot of people who don't know me, Adam, but thank you for rubbing my ego the right way. There's a lot of people who don't know who I am. My name's Julide. I'm a naturopath. I live in Melbourne. I have 3 children. I've studied a master's in food engineering, and I've written 2 books on Islam and the spiritual significance on eating according to Islamic principles. But in essence, who am I? I'm just a very curious human whose brain never stops, and I'm really growth orientated. I like to read a lot. I like to learn a lot, and thus I like to share the information. And that is probably me in a nutshell. I run a charity called Humanitarian Collective. Adam, thank you. And the charity was born during COVID time because people who did trust me in the community would come to me in private saying, this person needs financial support. This lady can't pay for her rent because she's lost her job. There was a lot of medical tyranny and a lot of coercion. Everybody remembers that 4 or 5 years ago. Now the tides have changed and it's a conversation for another day. But alhamdulillah, goodness was born from that. So I decided that I would, share this with a couple of people, and we established a charity in Australia with due respect to all the charities that are doing wonderful things. And especially lately, I think there's a lot more in Australia, which I'm so grateful for, because I find that there's so many charities doing work overseas and our neighbors are hungry. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I live in a very financially well-off suburb, and even next door suburb to my suburb, and I never knew poverty until I saw it during doing food drop-offs. I never knew. I've seen places that look like the villages in Turkey. I've been to homes that I don't even know how to word it at the moment still, right? So I run a charity called Humanitarian Collective, and we help local refugees, local DV victims, families in need. So it's a little bit of Sadaqah Jariyah work I try to do on the side, and with a collection of magnificent volunteers, by the way. I'm just the face. I take all the credit. I do barely any of the work, I promise you. Everyone who does the work is everyone behind the scenes that barely gets recognition ever. So, yeah.
So, Julide,
yes,
I want to ask you a question. Mm-hmm. So we all know, or I know, that you're a hands-on mother. You run a very busy practice, mashallah. Your philanthropy work is known now as well through Humanitarian Collective. How do you sort of maintain a balance, right, in terms of being very involved in the community, very involved in the work that you do from a medical point of view, holistically, we know. But as a mother of 3, how do you maintain that constant, being always there for your 3 children?
Are you ready for the answer?
Yeah.
Are you ready? I don't. I drop the balls. And I know I always promise myself from a social media perspective, I'll always be honest. I will never portray this perfection that doesn't exist. So I drop the balls. Like this morning, I didn't even get my kids' breakfast ready And hubby said, can you drop him off to the clinic? My hubby runs a dental clinic. And I said, babe, take him because I just want to dress in peace this morning. I don't want mascara in my nostril when I'm recording a podcast because normally that's what happens. Stains, whatever. I said, I just want clean clothing. I want to be able to just get ready in peace and just not come with anxiety. So the short answer, Adam, honestly, is I don't. Motherhood is like balancing like when you're at a circus and you're a clown and you've got 3 balls. I always end up dropping one and I have to show myself grace. So this morning, what did I drop? I dropped the ball of making sure my kids had something decent to eat in the morning and they had croissants instead. I said, babe, what are you doing? And hubby's like, oh, they're eating croissants. And I was like, don't get anxious, Jules. It's okay. So one way I manage is I believe in an 80-20 rule. Okay. So I say 80% of the time, as long as I've got it right, 80% of the time, it's okay that it's not right 20% of the time. Because we also need to instill a level of emotional intelligence into our children and a level of independence so that if they get everything right now because I forced them to get it right, then they're not emotionally intelligent children. And I actually haven't taught them anything, right? So at almost 9, Alyssa's almost 9, she knows, for example, if she went somewhere to have breakfast, she knows that breakfast has to be what is good in nutrition. She knows exactly what that is. And if she wants to have a bubble cup, she knows the only bubble cups we have are the tiger milk ones, which is the black pearls with soy milk and a little bit of the sugar, because the rest of them are full of, and I actually purposely go and say, hey, can we have a look at the ingredients? My 6.5-year-old is like glucose syrup, genetically modified, 129, and he's like sugar, and he just puts it aside. And I always say my kids don't do that because by some miracle my children are so intellectually are better than other children. Absolutely not. They're the same. I just give them the information. So, and that's why I started writing children's books, because I felt if the way that I speak to my children about these things, if parents could do the same thing, we would be creating a generation of children who are grounded in the information and the ability to make the decision themselves. So I don't always get it right, Adam. And sometimes I compromise my relationship with my husband. We don't spend a lot of time together for a week because I've got a podcast, I've got to see the patients. He's got his own commitments with his soccer club. He runs a not-for-profit charity soccer club too. But as long as you come back, like we always know how to restore that balance. Kind of like if I've taken away from the kids, I know how to bring that balance back. If I've taken away from my husband, I know how to bring that balance back. And I also have an order of, if I was to drop the balls, the first thing that goes is social media. Like I wouldn't kind of go, I need to post on socials, who cares what my children are eating? No, the first thing that will go is social media and anything related to that. And then my patients would go. If let's say my children are sick, then I have to cancel patients. So I suppose there's a deliberate sequence of how I would do things if I had to drop the ball. And then there's not so important things like this morning. My kids started their day with a croissant. And if you want me to be very picky, it's probably from your local, bakery, fortified with folic acid, which is really bad for you if you have the MTHFR gene mutation. We don't have it, but 60% of the Australian population does. And that's what contributes to lack of detoxification and mood problems in children, because they eat fortified wheat without knowing that they can't break down a synthetic folic acid. A conversation for another day, because there is so much anxiety in your face. I just can't do it.
She's just killing me,
You're
bro.
just like, oh my God,
you know what
so
it
anxious.
is? I'm like, I need to go and assess myself. Like, really, I want to go and get this breakdown and then bring it to you.
But you know what it is? I say the technicality because a lot of the time people assume that everything, like, I know it. I know most of it, alhamdulillah, but there's a lot I don't know. But just because I know most of it doesn't mean I get it right all the time either. Like my daughter, my almost 3-year-old, whenever we go to the soccer club, she's like, get me apple juice. I hate that stuff. There's no apple in there. But now instead of lying to her, I taught her that we will buy it, but we have to dilute it with water. So we leave that much juice in there. The rest of it is water in a pop-top container. Now, anyone who follows me, and 80% of that soccer club probably follows me on Instagram, are probably like, man, what an absolute hypocrite. But that's what works for me. And sometimes even with my boundaries, Adam, sometimes I don't have them because I don't have the emotional capacity to hold my boundaries because I'm so anxious, exhausted, tired that, again, I have to drop the ball. And is that not okay?
Well, I think that's what, everything you've just said, that's what I think constitutes you being an invested mum. I'll be honest, right? So when you say, for example, Today, for example, the kids had croissant for breakfast, and Dad took care of them, and hubby was there, and I had to just do me. The fact that you're aware of that, that's what makes you an invested mum. So you don't have to be that, sort of helicopter figure where you're constantly, and I know that I know I've experienced that as a father, right? There was a stage there, and maybe some will argue that I'm still like that I'm a bit of a helicopter dad, yeah? Like maybe, Allahu alam. Other people will say, and they can judge. And I know maybe
I'm still not allowed to confront myself. No, it's understandable.
And
I was that too many years ago, by the way.
I'm aware, right? Like I've watched your videos enough to know. That's why I mentioned this as well, right? Safe space. Nonetheless, that's what makes
safe space. 100,000 views later, safe space.
No, like as in there's, anyone that judges what we're saying and how we are. I mean, like with all due respect to them, there's a mirror, right? Go have a look in it and,
pick the weeds out of your own backyard.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I think why I behave this way too, Adam, is to allow people to feel okay to make mistakes too. Kind of like we need to be allowed to be humans, and it's not to sin in public eye and make it okay. That's also not what we're saying too, yeah? But there's a difference between there's so many layers to the onion of parenting, I suppose, because then what I'll do when I'm done with you guys and I'm done with the couple of calls I have today is I will go and spend quality time with my children, and I will make sure that we have a D&M tonight. How was your day, Mama? What did you do? What was the best part of your day? What did you struggle with today? How do you feel, Mum, going away? Right, we have these conversations because our children also need to know that we live in the 21st century and we make mistakes. Because if we can, like I say to my daughter sometimes, I don't know, Annem, I don't have the answer for you, but I'm going to research it because I want my daughter to be comfortable to also not always know. I don't actually have a desire to be this perfect parent that gets it right all the time. Sometimes I look brilliant at home. Sometimes I look like a hobo. Like you probably throw money in front of me if you saw me like that, right? And that's okay, because sometimes then my daughter's going to say, when I grew up, Mum most of the time did her best to look presentable even at home. Sometimes she couldn't because it's not easy having 3 kids and running A, B, and C. But I'm not going to retract from anything that I do because I can't do it 100%. I'm still going to soldier on and do it to the best of my ability and leave the judgment to Allah, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the journey. I'm not responsible for the end result. And this is the conversation that comes up when we talk about boycotting. And, I didn't allow my books to be sold on Amazon. I use an Apple laptop, by the way, which an Apple, we know what Apple funds, who Apple funds. However, I refuse to have my book on Amazon because of Project Nimbus, right? Now, why I say that is I can't be perfect in my boycotts, but I can do what is easier to me. Like when you said, when I said to you, you can do the Wagyu, but there might be other things that you don't do and you do so beautifully as a Muslim. And I don't do the Wagyu, but there may be other areas that I do behind the curtains that no one sees, that only it's between me and Allah, right? So I'm not here to judge anyone. And if I am judged, it doesn't, I've had 8 years of therapy on a fortnightly basis. You really think I would care what people think of me? And if I did, you really think I would be so comfortable in my own views if I cared about criticism? Because you can't get anywhere in life unless you're willing to be criticized, right? Like cognitive dissonance, so many of us, and I don't want to experience that, where you think some way, but your behavior is different to that, right? You've disassociated. So kind of like, I want the war on Gaza to end, but I can't stop buying Maccas, or I can't stop drinking my Coke. Like, it's a very little petty price to pay to show your own self where you stand, and to be able to kind of, I suppose, that information to really penetrate your spiritual body, And I gave the example of the Apple laptop versus the Project Nimbus. Like, I didn't care that I probably lost tens of thousands of dollars because I didn't. Even one lady emailed me today, Jules, please, the UK, I need the book there. I can't get it. You don't have any distributors in the UK. Darus Salam Books is great, and I was speaking about it, and probably the best way I can put it is they find the shipping's very expensive, and they don't want to pay that much for shipping for my book to come from Australia to the UK. So what I'll probably do is connect them with my distributors and get it printed in the UK. And so again, it's okay to sometimes, I suppose, compromise in some avenues and not compromise in others, because there is so much unethical everything embedded in everything, in the clothing that we wear, polyester, in the places that we shop. You do you. You know, I always say that. You do whatever you can do, and it's between you and Allah. And what you can't do, it's not for people to judge because they don't know the circumstances. Like no one knew when I put that much water into the pop top with that much juice that my daughter so happily licked and then tipped onto the grass. They only saw the pop top. So they probably judged me for it. Like, ew, you talk about don't give sugar to your kids and here's your child holding a pop top. Or, you know, I say I compromise sometimes. I hate any form of hot chips. Seed oils are horrible. They cause cancer. They inflame the gut. They don't allow us to absorb nutrition. There's a plethora of problems, right? However, my children sometimes have hot chips. And again, as a now 9 and almost 7-year-old, they know I might have a couple of chippies and then I'll stop because chips are a part of the 21st century and our nafs feels like it. Like yesterday, Alyssa, my little angel, subhanAllah, Alpi goes to me, we're sitting there, we're having dinner. Alpaslan is 6.5. And he says to me, Mum, I really want to one day taste McDonald's and KFC because they've never had it in their lives. For more reasons other than halal and haram, we boycott those brands. And then I said, Alpaslan, I know you want to, but unless they stop arming X, Y, and Z, we will never touch that food at any cost, right? We're not allowed to, Mum. As Muslims, this is what we do, right? And he said, all right, Mum, then what can we do? And I said, you tell me. And he's like, can I try the burger at Schnitz then? We've never had Schnitz in our life, you know, that other fast food, right? I said, you know what, you can. And he bought it. He had a quarter of the burger. It was like a chicken, right? And it was just probably a Steggles chicken. So don't talk about the halal and tayyib concept. But instead of just saying, no, we don't do it and making him feel awkward, I said, perhaps we don't do KFCs and the Red Roosters and the McDonald's, but you can have Schnitz and have a taste because I also don't want my children to go behind my back or feel like they're missing out because they don't yet understand the impact of what I am trying to instill into them, right? And then Alyssa started to go, look, Alpaslan, and she's turning 9 next month. She was like, there's a lot of things I want to eat too, but I just can't because number one, I respect my body and I don't want unhealthy food to go into my body. And number two, Alpaslan, they're on the boycott list. And I love that because honestly, and I know I've had these convos with Adam being parents ourselves, and I'm like, when I was Alyssa's age, I would do anything to fit in. I would never stand out like Alyssa. Hell no. I would never have that confidence. I would amalgamate into anything you want me to be. I will love cars if you're going to love me. I'll love cars. I'll love Barbies. I'll be anything as long as I don't feel like, because I didn't have that sense of self-worth, you know? So I feel so proud that I can see this 8-year-old stand in her own light and print off stuff from the internet and give to her friends. And then her friends go to her, oh, sorry, Alyssa, my dad bought an Apple iPad. I told him not to buy Apple, but he said the other brands were not good. And it's okay. It's just, and I say like, and this is another thing that comes up. Isn't that a lot of stress on your children? Like, why are you, causing them to be what they need to be at such a young age? Because when do you plant the seeds? And in Islam, it's the age of 7, isn't it? Because the prefrontal cortex is developed enough for some level of logic and for some level of consequential behavior. So whilst you don't have the malaika writing your sins and the good that you've done, there is a level of now the seeding is to happen so that when the time comes, the children have that. And I think we're raising children where dogs are flying and, cats are doing whatever, and our children are very emotionally unintelligent.
Yeah.
Right. And so by the age of 7, you have to begin some level of teaching your children to be able to control their nafs and control their ego and not be distracted by a bee.
Is it a bee or is it a fly?
It looks like a bee.
It's a bee. It's a bee.
Yeah. It's a male bee because it doesn't have a stinger.
I've seen it for the past 5-6 minutes. It doesn't have a stinger.
It doesn't look like it has a stinger.
Oh, okay.
The other day, Alpaslan got stung by a bee.
Oh, wow.
He was like, Mom, I got stung by a bee. And he just pulled it out and put it under cold water. It was all right.
Sure.
He survived. Alhamdulillah, you'll survive a bee sting.
All right, let's go. Well, I'm not distracted anymore.
Yeah, going back to what you just said, right? Like, I feel like I had goosebumps when you're talking about your daughter's ability to speak and be her own person, right?
I love that.
I feel like that's just as a result of the parent that you are. You know, like maybe as children, we didn't experience that from our parents. And so we want to improve for our children to say, hey, like, you need to be you and you need to be comfortable being you. Don't try and fit in just for to fit the mold.
No.
You know?
And I always tell my kids that, Adam, like your compass, your caliber is Islam. And our parents didn't do it because their worries were different. Yeah, guys, their survival, their worries were coming to a country they didn't speak the native language. They were just trying to get halal meat right. Right.
Yeah.
True.
Legit. That's
like, I remember Allah Yarhamu, my great uncle passed away 8 years ago. And when I was having a conversation with his wife more recently, she was like, when we first migrated to Australia 60 years ago, we would throw away the pot with the meat if we thought it was pork because we didn't have a lot of halal options available then. So I always say, Alhamdulillah, that we have an opportunity to be this generation of children where we have financial stability somewhat, right, compared to our parents who had to work very long hours to support us. And now we have an ability to go, wait a minute, this was all done incorrectly. Let's correct it, but allowing Islam to be our compass, right? I'm not telling you to correct it because the most famous Harvard neurologist told you. I'm just saying go back to our backyard, right? And yes, Alyssa is like that because of the conversations that we have had with her. And they're conversations that I would never have with my mom because my mom had 6 kids. I didn't want to burden her. I didn't want to burden her. I didn't want to ask her anything because I didn't want to feel ashamed of a mistake I had made. So, I kept secrets because I didn't want them to feel bad. I didn't want to get punished. And we don't want that for our children because when you're 8, there is no punishment. There are no consequences. It's just encouragement in the right direction for our children, right? And so now, and this is such a funny thing. So I started the year, Alyssa's like, look, raising Alyssa, she's nearly 9 now, but when she was first born, I was like really that mom that only dressed my kid in designer because it made me feel better about myself if my daughter looked a particular way, right? Came the age of 8, which she's coming out of almost now, and, she dresses herself. So usually it's just blue denim, loose, $2 Target, white and black T-shirts, either Palestinian print or Aboriginal print, whatever she is an activist for, and the most horrific red Pumas I've seen in my life, like straight out of the Bronx, Broadmeadow shoes. And, this is where you draw the line and kind of go, this is my daughter's place. I'm not going to tell her how to dress as long as it's aligned within Islamic paradigm and everything is appropriate, then she can wear what she wants. But when she was 1, and even when she was 3, how she dressed was a reflection of how I felt about myself. And I think a lot of parents, Adam, we're still stuck there. Well, we were an extension of our parents too. We wanted to make them proud, didn't we? Right? And a lot of things we did because we wanted to feel loved. And it's not that they didn't love us, but the way they communicated love to us was not in a language that we understood. Right? And now that inshallah we can get it a little bit right. And, if there are so many signs that the end of times are near, and we know that as Muslims, don't we? Then we are coming to a time where inshallah things are going to get better. And I think this is kind of the foundation, and we probably won't be alive to see it, but our great-grandchildren or our great-great-grandchildren maybe. And I pray that this is an opportunity to then allow for the Alyssas and the Muhammads and the Alis of this world to shine in their own light. And because we can't do it as parents, like you can't say anything because you're too scared that everyone's going to criticize me, for example. And when I say you, I'm talking generally, right? So if we can't stand in our own light, how do we anticipate we're going to raise children who can stand in their own light? Hell no. We, as Turkish people, we grew up clean your house because you don't want, the aunties and the uncles to talk behind your back, right? You're laughing because same cultural thing, right?
Universal.
Now I tell my daughter because cleanliness is half of deen, because we want to be in a beautiful environment because Allah loves what is beautiful, not because someone's coming over to your house. You know what I mean? Like it's not a cultural cleanliness. It's an Islamic cleanliness, and everything. I think all of our cultures have amalgamated religion so much that there's a lot of gray waters. And I think now our time, inshallah, is kind of to unweave all of that and to reweave it so that it's just the Islamic, I suppose, philosophy and the Islamic jurisprudence that grounds us in our cleaning, in our discussion, in our ability to have conversation when people disagree with us, in our ability to be okay if someone doesn't like us. Like a lot of people don't like me. Adam thinks everyone's my fan. Adam needs to call onto your podcast some people who are not very fond of me. And this is just the reality of anyone. A lot of people will like you and a lot of people won't. And
I think you said it earlier.
But I feel like if everyone likes you, like I remember like Mike Tyson was once on a podcast, he goes, if everyone likes you, then you don't like yourself.
Yes.
Like anyone who's
you're
a
a people
friend to
pleaser.
everyone,
Yeah.
you're not a friend to yourself.
Yeah, well, not to say we're like the prophets and stuff,
Yeah.
but think of
Or the
Musa
Rasul.
alayhi salam. I mean, Jesus sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he had what, 12 friends,
Yeah.
so to speak, right? And how many people in 950 years of Musa alayhi salam's life, how many followers did he have? Like 40, something like 40.
Yeah.
A lot of the scholars agree on that kind of, and that's 950 years of life. And
Yeah.
I don't say that to say that's who I am or that's who we are, but it's to say that even the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was criticism. It's okay to disagree with someone.
absolutely.
Like,
Assassination attempts. Like it's not even
Right,
criticism. It's like they wanted to kill the Rasul.
Right.
So
and so we need to get comfortable in feeling uncomfortable about not being loved by everyone.
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
to love yourself.
definitely.
First and foremost, and when you do, Adam, that's when you get Alyssa's of the world where she can be like, I really want to eat Nutella, but I'll never buy Nutella. And I'm so proud of that conviction. I always pray, Ya Rab, please keep them online, because just because you raise them a particular way, it also doesn't mean that's how their end is going to be. But you're responsible again for the journey, not the outcome, right?
Yeah.
That's Allah's decree. And there's a very famous Turkish saying where it says, an awliya can have a child who is completely unjust, and a completely un-Islamic person or an alcoholic who doesn't live Islam, doesn't know the eye of Islam, can raise an alim. And that's why I say we're not void of responsibility as long as we do what we need to as we learn, which is a process. I don't know everything. I still don't. I'll look at this interview a month later and I'll be like, meh, that's so funny I said that. I don't agree with that part of myself anymore. And if we can't give each other grace, then how are we supposed to move forward?
Inshallah. I think that's very well put.
That's fun.
You asked me to refer back to something, but we're out of time. It was in regards to artificial insemination into beef.
Oh, that's such a sad story. I reckon, what was your name?
Suhail.
Sohail is never going to have Wagyu again.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very sad.
I'm completely okay with it now. After hearing all this stuff,
Is it okay, like just
I'm
in drips and
vegetarian.
drabs? Like, is it okay, like for example, once a year you have, or once a month you have your Wagyu steak? Or are you just saying like it
Look, you know
cannot be
what?
consumed?
Like what I said to Sohail before, you do whatever's easy for you. Again, what you're saying to me is it okay if you poison yourself once a year? Is it okay if you have alcohol
It's
once
that
a
bad.
year? I can't
It's
tell
that,
you.
It's that bad.
Is it that bad? Because when you look at Ibn al-Qayyim's book, it's Imam Ghazali's book on the two desires. He speaks about, and excuse me for saying this so openly, the desire for sexual intimacy and the desire for food stems from the same trauma. SubhanAllah, this is in our backyard. So when we judge someone because they're having alcohol, for example, are we also judging someone so whether you have alcohol, whether you're addicted to pornography, whether you're addicted to food, whether I'm addicted to online shopping, which alhamdulillah I'm not, but a lot of women are, is it not stemming from the same trauma? It is, but isn't it? So why are we judging the action rather than understanding the why? And that's what natural medicine is always about. Like, why? So I can't tell you, Adam. I would be very arrogant if I said, yes, you can, yes, you can't. In Surah Al-Baqarah, when are we allowed to have pork? We're allowed to, aren't we? If we were at war, if we had no choice, if we were on the verge of starvation, we could eat a pig, can't we? So I think that answers your question. But a lot of the time, we don't really need Wagyu
No more Wagyu, bro.
in our lives.
But like even the connection with all of the kind of like the physical ailments and everything that happens after not taking care of yourself or being cognizant of these things, I feel like, and this is like a little anecdote from when I was a kid, and subhanAllah, I didn't know that I had issues with, or it didn't even exist in my brain, that lactose intolerance or IBS or whatever it is was a thing. And I used to grow up going to school every day anxious. I used to think, why was it like, what's going on? Was something going to happen at school today, whatever it is? And I used to be like, always looking over my shoulder. And then like, I'm always like, my brain was always like looking for those things and ticking. And I grew up like a very anxious kid. And then like, I would think to myself, okay, this is the reason why I was anxious. Like, look, it was like self-fulfilling prophecies. And I remember the reason why. And I remember going back to my mom was like, you used to always eat cereal when you were a kid.
So it could have been the lactose.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and see, if your mum knew and made that connection, your childhood would have been a better one. And your ability to focus and concentrate, your cognitive abilities. And this is why I feel like I have to do what I do regardless of criticism. Because if I don't, who will? And if there's one other parent that's going to save their child from growing up with the anxiety that you had, because that affected the way you produced serotonin, because 90% of it is made in your gut, then that's all I need to put my head on the pillow and go, alhamdulillah. You know what I'm saying? And this is why, and this is the sad predicament, I think, in this day and age, like our scholars that we follow, they're not well-versed in nutrition, medicine, the understanding of the science. But back in the days, 150 years ago, Sohail, even longer than that, like when you look at the big guns in Islam, they were astronomers, they were physicians, they were everything at the once. We barely have a degree in one thing. And so when you've studied Islamic sciences for 3 years and you've concreted yourself as a scholar, but you have no understanding of nutrition, then how can you tell me cochineal is halal? I won't accept that from you. I actually wouldn't accept that from you if you were a Harvard graduate either, because it doesn't prevail my common sense. And I think people are so disconnected from common sense, from, I suppose, even intuition. Like everything has to be scientific. You got to see it, you got to smell it, you got to hear it, you got to touch it. And if it's not accepted. But what happens to the spiritual body? You know, I always think that, I always tell parents, and they always come to me, and I had that gut instinct. I should have gone with my gut. The gut is the way Allah talks to you, and that message that Allah sends you. But when you're sick for such a long time, everything starts to really, I suppose, you know, when you have a clean diet, and you would have noticed in the past, if you've ever gone on diets or you've eliminated X, Y, and Z from your food schedule, and then you go and eat something unhealthy, you'll vomit, you'll feel disgusting, because you've cleaned yourself up and everything's working like clockwork, yeah? You go back to your dodgy diet, even if you eat 3 pounds of McDonald's, other than the general fatigue, constipation, bloating, you're not going to have any additional symptoms to that, because I suppose the body's compass is so drained and drowned that it's not going to give you clear and concise information, you know? Alhamdulillah, I pray, and I feel sorry for that 9-year-old Suhail that suffered, and I'm so sorry you had to, with all the inflammation and how that affected. And imagine how that affected your relationships with your friends, your relationship with your parents. Like, see how we think it's just, who cares, it's cereal, but it's not. Look at, there's a plethora. It's like a domino effect on every aspect of your life.
And definitely. And I feel like, because we're running out of time a little bit here, I feel like it's really like important for us to understand, like, even from beyond the obviously the religious realm, like if it's halal, it's okay, if it's haram, it's not. Like understanding things from like a moral compass perspective is really important, because like you were saying,
Tayyib embeds the moral compass and sustainability.
And it's beautiful that you said, it's really beautiful that you said that God communicates to us through
with
the
our gut intuition.
Subhanallah.
But we've disconnected from that, because imagine your average parent has a child with a fever and they go to the GP, and no disrespect to GPs, but what are they going to do? If you've ever gone to a hospital with a fever for a child, they're just going to give him Panadol and Nurofen. And we know as high as a fever goes, if it goes down that fast, there's a risk of febrile convulsion both ways. And I feel like this is the time we're trying to kind of wake up the ummah to say, the answers are in your backyard. Have these particular supplements or foods at home and learn to manage, because the system wants us to rely on it for everything. And you should be able to be some level self-sustainable. A little bit of herbs at home, a little bit of a home pharmacy with an F, that if the kid gets a cold or flu, you know what to give them. You know, little bit of something in your own control so that you don't rely on the system. And we rely on the system heavily.
Way too much.
Heavily. So much so that we don't trust ourselves anymore. That's how much dissonance there is, you know, subhanAllah. And people say to me, yeah, but that's because you know what you know. I swear it's not because of that. I've read probably 20 different dental books and 200 pieces of research on dentistry. And I'm probably an unqualified holistic dentist with no degree, but I've done that much work because something had come up for my daughter and I didn't want to. And that's not helicopter parenting. My child is my amana. So when I report to Allah what I have allowed and disallowed during her time of lack of brain maturity, I can't say, but the dentist said it. Where was my brain? Did I cognitively think over? And I say this to my patients too, Sohail. I say, when I tell you something, I want you to know why I'm giving this to your child. I don't want you to have that conversation with Adam and go, what's that? Oh, I don't know. Julide gave it to me. You don't know what you're giving to your child. How could you trust me? How could you trust me? At least read the label. But that's how dissociated we've become from everything. Like if Joe Blow says it, and that same goes for me, don't believe everything I say, go and cross-check it. If it doesn't sit well with you, question it, go and do the research. Where did I get that information from? You know, I don't care if you're a Harvard professor, and I don't care if you're a janitor. I could take a janitor's advice if it's sound, and I won't take the advice of a Harvard professor if it's molested in adulterated science, you know?
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
I think touched on amazing points. Like
I feel like there's a part 2 coming, bro.
Bro, there's a part 2, 100%, inshallah, maybe 6 months, I reckon. 6 months. But there's definitely part 2. We like to end our podcasts every week or every month, or however often we do it, with a specific question. And just in a minute, what advice could you give us or to the viewers that's financial related? So if there's any financial related advice.
Financial related advice.
Because this podcast is called Faithfully Invested. And so we like to throw a curveball question at the end, which is like, what piece of financial advice would you give any viewer?
Yeah, so do I answer that question now? Yeah, I actually would think, number one, alongside your salary-based job, always have an entrepreneur gig on the side. I think the only way you can move forward with any investment ideas is if you had a little bit on the side, because unfortunately the typical wages on a salary-based job is just enough to get you going. And so if you have any ideas or any opportunity for you to have an entrepreneur gig on the side, selling whatever is going to create an opportunity for a little bit of financial flexibility and an opportunity to kind of invest rather than not, because you're never going to go ahead on a salary based, especially in this day and age. I feel like even if hubby and wife works, if you're on a salary, good luck to you. The other day I was looking on Uber and a whole watermelon was like $35. How does the average person afford that? Right? And then of course people eat packaged food. How can you not? And that's what I say to parents too, when they're like, but this is expensive. Then go plant the herb in your backyard. I don't have a garden. Then go get a plastic pot. Use your plastic yogurt from Sahara. Dig some holes on the bottom, buy $3 soil or steal it from your neighbor and plant a seed that you got out of your strawberries. The seeds are on the outside. You can just blend them and use it, and then you've got an organic strawberry plant.
She means borrow the soil from your neighbor, by the way. Just in
borrow
case.
it with permission.
Jazakallah khair, Julide. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
I think
much
that
for
was
doing
amazing feedback.
Thank you for having me. I really
We loved having you. So Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll have all of Julide's links, inshallah, to her book and everything else, inshallah, in the description. So,